All I know is that I was so sick and I was so scared and I had no idea what was happening to me. You need to watch this video if you have been considering following a plant-based diet, or if you have some doubts about it, or if you already are following a plant-based diet but you've kind of forgotten your whys. This video is for you. You guys need to hear my story. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If it's your first time landing on one of my videos, welcome. My name is Stasia and my channel is all about health and weight loss content following a whole food plant-based diet. If you are looking to lose weight, or if you're looking to improve your health, or both, like myself, then be sure to hit subscribe to follow along my own plant-based weight loss journey as I share everything that I'm doing, so I'm certain it can help you too. Alright guys, so I just kind of want to jump into today's video. This video is going to be a little bit different than my usual content, as I mostly share recipes or what I eat in a day videos, but I feel like this video is really important. I did do something similar to this video about a year ago, but I've gained a ton of subscribers since then, so I thought it was a little overdue to kind of share my backstory of why I follow this way of eating, as well as how I lost an incredible amount of weight and healed myself following a whole food plant-based diet. Seriously guys, my experience was crazy. I would not wish it upon my worst enemy, but there was a silver lining, and that's what this story is going to be about. So I'm gonna kind of start from the beginning, but be sure to stick around to the end because that's the best part. But we need to know kind of how I got there for it to, come full circle and make sense. As well as I will be giving an update at the end of the video as far as where I'm at now, my thoughts about eating this way now. So let's get into it. All right, so where to get started? I am about to take you guys down memory lane. So buckle up, here we go. So growing up, I was actually raised vegetarian. So both my parents were not raised vegetarian, but they both just kind of decided, first my dad, and then he brought my mother into it after they got married, that they were just gonna give up meat just for ethical reasons, for health reasons. They just did not want to eat meat anymore. And now keep in mind, this is going back to the 60s and 70s when being vegan or being vegetarian was not popular and there was not a lot of options out there as far as eating in this lifestyle. So growing up vegetarian for me was kind of an interesting experience, to say the least. I was always the only one in my whole class that really couldn't do pizza day that easily, or hot dog day, or basically any birthday party or barbecue, because I was the only one who didn't eat meat. It was really hard trying to explain to people why I didn't eat meat because I really didn't know why we didn't eat meat. We just never did. But at home, it was just normal. That's just how we ate, and I didn't really think of it any other way because I didn't have anything else to compare it to. Not to mention my dad was an incredible cook, so, he really knew how to put those foods together, so we definitely were not lacking in the taste department. I also want to add that we were probably the only people that I knew in my circle of friends that actually ate home-cooked meals. So I just remember McDonald's being a really huge thing with all my friends, but it was like a once a year event for our family, and that was usually just to get like an ice cream cone or something along those lines. But fast food just did not exist in our vocabulary. At the time, I hated it. I was always so jealous of seeing my friends bring, their little, what are they called? The little processed things that they bring in their lunchbox. I can't even remember, with the crackers and the meat and the Lunchables. Thank you. I used to be so jealous that we didn't get those. I didn't even really get cookies in my lunchbox, and I remember being jealous of the kids that had their cookies every day. My parents really just focused on making whole food meals at home, and going back even to that time, which, I don't want to age myself or anything, but guess what? We actually sat at the dining table together. What a concept. So the point being is that I grew up eating a lot of home-cooked meals, whole food meals, not a lot of processed food, definitely no fast food, and I could not be more thankful for it now. Didn't really care too much for it at the time, but it was the best kind of parenting and the best way to eat when raising young kids. I also want to point out that I was never sick growing up. I mean, never sick. So all the kids around me, as you know, it's still that way. Tons of kids get sick multiple times throughout the winter seasons, especially here in Canada. I was never sick. I could probably count on one hand how many times I've been sick in my entire life. So let that set in and let that speak for itself. Now, fast forward. So I hit my teen years and, grew a little bit of independence. Mom and dad didn't have as much control anymore over what we ate because I was out of the house a lot, always around my friends, had my own money, so things started to change. So during my teenage years, we would just be hopping on our bikes. Again, what a concept. Hopping on our bikes to just, go to the mall, go to variety stores, hit up fast food places. So this whole new world was opening up for me and I was in love. I started to eat a little bit of meat because I just was so curious and I couldn't resist the smell of my friends' burgers and everything else around me. I ended up loving fast food meat. I know it's crazy to me now, but at the time I loved fast food meat. So between the ages of, I don't know where in my teens exactly, but I would say probably like 13, 14 to my early 20s, I started to eat meat. But here's the funny part is that I never really actually liked meat per se. Now just bear with me on this one. To this day, I don't think I've ever had a steak in my life. I've never sat down to just have a plate of fish. I never had like a huge plate of chicken or anything like that. The kind of meat I'm talking about was specifically fast food meat because at heart I was a vegetarian and I loved my vegetarian foods. So I was never really a true meat eater per se. Even when I was eating it, I just liked the junk food meat. So around the time that I started to think about having children, which is around 25 or so, I really decided that I wanted to start taking my health in my hands. I was doing a lot more reading on nutrition and health. I've always been passionate about that my whole life. Always so fascinated, I guess is the word, with just how fruits and vegetables and whole foods, how nourishing they are for the body and the healing power. So I've always been intrigued by it. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to start to detox my body and get myself in a healthier place to eventually have a baby. So that's exactly what I did. I ended up going on a very high raw plant-based diet. I ended up losing a little bit of weight, but more importantly, my energy. Oh my goodness. I don't think I have ever had that much energy in my entire life, like hands down. I remember just feeling like I just wanted to run, which I don't like to run, but all of a sudden I wanted to run. I just felt like maybe how a child feels, where you just have so much energy that it's like impossible just to sit down and do nothing. My energy was through the roof. So baby came along around 26, my son was born, and 2 years later, my daughter came. Life was good until it wasn't good. So unfortunately, a lot of stressful events came shortly after, one of them being the loss of my father, which happened to be one of my favorite humans in my life. So I never experienced such a close loss, and that grief was just enormous for me to navigate. As well as I was going through a separation with my children's father. Financial issues were strained at the time. There was a lot of things that just kind of all dumped on me at the same time because, that's just how it goes sometimes in life. Having two babies very, very close together, one that was medically fragile and a ton of other stuff happening in my external world around me, that led to me no longer even thinking about myself for 1 minute of a day. It led to eating on the fly, eating all times of the night, eating the wrong things, binge eating, stress eating, emotional eating. For those of you who follow me, you guys know I talk a lot about that on my channel because I would say for me, those are some of my biggest issues. Eating healthy has really never been my issue because I naturally gravitate towards fruits and vegetables and whole foods. I actually like the way they taste. I know some people struggle with just not liking the way they taste at all, but because I'm all right with my cooking, if I do say so myself, I do know how to put these foods together too to taste really nice. So that's not my issue, but the stress eating, the emotional eating, all of those things are more my issue. So anyways, not going to get too much into that here, but those of you following me know that that's something that I talk about often. So during that time, I really let myself go. I really couldn't care less either. I was just so hyper focused on taking care of my children, trying to navigate this like whirlwind of crazy emotions that I was going through, and didn't have a ton of help along the way. So I resorted to food. So fast forward a couple of years when I met my husband. Well, my boyfriend at the time, but my now husband. So again, life started to get good. You know, a lot of these things that I was navigating were now kind of calming down, and I found the most wonderful man and partner I have ever had in my life. Thank you, God. So, you know, my life really just started to turn around for the better. So my husband and I were just, you know, very new into our relationship. I would say, I think it was only like a few months we were into our relationship. And all of a sudden, I went to bed one night feeling perfectly fine. And I woke up feeling the sickest I have ever felt in my life. I woke up with the most bloated stomach I think I've ever had in my life. Like, it was like I was like 8 or 9 months pregnant, but I wasn't. And I felt extremely, extremely nauseous, which both of those things were just so uncommon for me. I'm not someone who's ever suffered from any type of digestive issue, as well as nausea. That's just something that I've also, thank God, you know, rarely experienced in my life. I was so sick. And little did I know at that time, that was just the beginning. So when I woke up that morning, I remember just thinking like, what is going on with me? Did I eat something bad last night? Am I pregnant? Like, I didn't know what to think. So of course I thought, or expected, I should say, that maybe after I used the washroom, you know, the bloating would go down, I would feel better. Like, I remember feeling like, what the heck is going on with me? Because again, I'm not someone who really gets sick that often. So anytime I feel off, I'm just like, what's going on? Like, it's just such a foreign feeling to not feel good. Well, I ended up taking several pregnancy tests only to show me that I was not pregnant, but I was still not convinced because the nausea was continuing. I was feeling very sick after I would eat any type of food. I was feeling very, very fatigued. You know, a lot of the things that, you know, sounded like it could be pregnancy symptoms. So I went as far as to make an appointment at the doctor's. They ended up testing me. Of course, it showed negative. And then they ended up sending me for the for a couple different ultrasounds. Like, I forget what the one's called. It's a little bit more intense. At any rate, they proved that there was nothing in my uterus, so I was not pregnant, which just, I remember leaving the hospital that day thinking to myself, but how? Like, how am I this sick for what? Like, if it's not pregnancy? Again, little did I know that was just the beginning. The symptoms I ended up experiencing were insane, and it felt like every time that maybe one symptom, I started to get it under control, or I thought I had figured it out, or it started to calm down, then another one would pop up. Like, I just remember having books all around my house with like lists of my symptoms so I wouldn't forget, oh, I got to tell this to the doctor. Like, it was just, every time I turned around, something was new and did not feel good. So I'm going to list off some of the symptoms that I was experiencing, but keep in mind, this probably is not even the full list because it was, like I said, just one thing after the other, but I'm going to ramble off the list of things that were affecting me at that time. Okay, so one of the main symptoms I had was extreme bloating. And keep in mind, I'm not talking about normal bloating after sometimes we eat like beans or something like that. This was intense bloating. Like, I brought a picture to the doctors and they said that I should have been admitted to the hospital because that's how intense it was. It was just so inflamed and so stretched out and so painful. Like, it was crazy. And this was a daily occurrence that was happening now. It was just constant extreme bloating. I remember it got to a point that I was so nervous to even leave my house because I knew that if I had to eat, that by the end of the day or like an hour after eating, I would be so bloated that my clothes wouldn't even look right on me. I would literally bring an extra pair of pants, or I'd be wearing something very stretchy and loose because I was already anticipating looking 8 or 9 months pregnant. Oh my gosh, I just remember feeling so insecure about it too. That's, you know, on a whole other side note, but as women and men, you know, I'm sure you can understand and empathize with that part as well. But I just remember always wanting a jacket or having something tied around my waist because I knew that I looked pregnant when I wasn't. Chronic nausea was probably the second strongest, biggest symptom that I had. Now, I never vomited, thank God, but also I remember just feeling so sick that I almost wished I could vomit because it just was so irritating and debilitating to just always feel like I needed to vomit. It was very insane. It was honestly one of the worst symptoms. I remember experiencing extreme chills all the time, like the type of chills that you have when you have a fever, except I didn't have a fever, but I remember not being able to get warm. The only thing that would slightly soothe it for me would be a hot bath or a hot shower. But you know, when you've got the chills, even to get in that water is so difficult because you're already so cold. So to, you know, take off your clothes to even get there, it was very, very difficult. But that was about the only thing. I just remember there being piles of blankets on me, my husband wrapping himself around me to help try to calm those chills down. I experienced those chills all the time. I also ended up developing sores in my mouth, which was something I had never had before in my life. They were like those like blister type sores, like I don't know if you've ever had them, because I have never had them except for that period of time, but they were like blisters that filled up with water and they would just like appear out of nowhere in my mouth. I was freaking out about that because I mean, nobody wants sores in their mouth, and yeah, I had never had anything like that before. Another major symptom that I had was a lack of appetite. Now, I think that was probably mostly due to the fact that I just had extreme nausea all the time. So obviously you do not feel like eating when you feel that way. Another odd symptom that I was experiencing was random bruising. And I'm not talking about teeny tiny bruises. I'm talking about bruises like the palm of my hand, mostly on my legs. And these bruises would be like black and blue and purple. And nothing happened to cause these bruises. I remember going to the doctors for that and saying like, what is going on? Why am I experiencing bruising? They ran blood work, all of that, and they had no explanation for it. But it was terrifying just to wake up and have bruises randomly popping up all over my legs. I had alternating diarrhea and constipation, which that's a ton of fun. And I would have random pains shot to my stomach, shot in my rib cage, even in my back. I mean, the kind that take your breath away. I remember one time being in the grocery store with my husband. I was just walking about, just normal, looking at the fruits, and all of a sudden I had a huge shot of pain that like had me keeled over. Like I literally thought I was gonna fall over from how bad the pain was. I had ringing in my ears, constant headaches, numbness and tingling in my hands and legs. I remember times with my hands that I wasn't even able to wash the dishes or like hold a plate. I'd be dropping them because they would just feel like they're dead. They would just be so numb. I had mucousy bowel movements, like never had anything like that in my life, but it was just straight mucus. I don't want to go into too much information there. If you've ever had that, then you know what a sight that can be. I started to develop all of these dry patches all over my skin. Again, something that the doctor had no explanation for. I had severe acid reflux. I got heart palpitations, which if you stick around to the end of this video, there might be some connection there. I don't know. But I had the palpitations and I would have a racing heart. Let me tell you, those two things would scare the you-know-what right out of me. I developed vertigo. I remember just having to like hold on to something many times because I thought I was just going to be passing out. And it made me actually afraid to leave my house alone because I always felt weak and always felt like I literally could just drop dead at any moment. And one of the worst symptoms that I had in all of this was that I ended up feeling sick no matter what I ate. That was horrifying. No matter what I ate, it just made me feel nauseous. I had the bloating. And so I ended up convincing myself that all of a sudden I was just allergic to food. I mean, I genuinely believe that for the fact that when I didn't eat, I felt a little bit better. I felt functionable. But as soon as I ate something, that's when all the symptoms would just start rising to the surface and I felt the most sick. At the time, it seemed that there was nothing I could eat that would actually agree with me, and so therefore I ended up developing a lot of fear around food. I ended up going to so many different doctors. I mean, I was so desperate for an answer, but unfortunately they always sent me home the same way. Sorry, we don't know what's going on. I went through a slew of different tests. Some of those included multiple ultrasounds, multiple endless blood work. I was referred out to a hematologist for the bruising that I was experiencing on my legs. I had 2 different H. pylori tests. I also had multiple stool tests because they were convinced that maybe I had some type of parasite, which those came back fine too. I was referred out to rheumatology, I had x-rays, I had a CAT scan done, and that one was scary because the doctor specifically had said to me that they were looking for cancer on the CAT scan and that I needed to be aware of how serious this was. So that appointment I will never forget, and I just remember walking out of there just feeling like, what is going on with me? Like, this is crazy. I feel like I'm living in a movie or I'm living someone else's life. It was a very hard time. I had an MRI, I had an endoscopy. That's where the tube goes down your throat. It's a scope to be able to check out your stomach. And I also had a colonoscopy, and that's where the tube goes up your butt to check out your intestines. I had a live blood analysis, and I actually started seeing a naturopathic doctor and started doing a ton of different natural remedies based on her recommendations. And with all of that, I had no answers. Nobody could figure out what the heck was going on with me. There is nothing scarier than not feeling well and not knowing how to feel well again. It was such an eye-opener. It really showed me that it's like, you know, in life we complain about a lot of things. We, you know, want a lot of things, a lot of superficial things. But when you don't have your good health, none of that matters. I mean, none of it matters. Health is king. I remember feeling extremely defeated, extremely terrified, and I developed severe health anxiety, which still has somewhat of a ripple effect even on me to this day. Again, I think that also stems from the fact that I'm just not really a person that gets sick a lot, so to feel anything other than normal, it scares me. But then also because I've had this experience, it just really like catapulted that health anxiety for me. And I honestly, the health anxiety might have been the most debilitating thing, even above the symptoms. It was that bad. I am so lucky to come from a loving family, as well as I have amazing friends that I consider just like family that really supported me during this time, because literally that's all I could talk about, think about, eat, breathe, sleep. Like, it was just, I needed to get better. Nobody could help me. And so it was during that time that I just had this like drive out of nowhere that I'm like, if no one can help me, then I'm going to help myself. And I was bound and determined to figure out how. How in that moment, I had no idea, but I did not stop until I figured something out. So, of course, Google became my best friend, and that is no understatement. I mean, I literally got to a point that I remember my husband saying to me, like, just, you need to stop. Like, you have to stop for your own mental health. But it was a little bit weird because on one hand, it would scare the crap out of me, some of the stuff that I was, you know, reading. And then on the other hand, it was the thing that calmed me down because I don't know, I'm just a very like solution-oriented type of person. I don't want to just give up when I feel uncomfortable. I need to figure out how I'm going to get comfortable again. So of course I'm researching different diets. I'm reading all kinds of information on different types of food, gluten and dairy being the biggest offenders for inflammation. So those ones were the first ones to go out of my diet. Overnight, I became gluten-free and dairy-free. Now, while that did give me a little bit of relief, especially the dairy, I was still sick. It wasn't the only culprit. But going gluten-free and dairy-free overnight was still a very drastic change for me. But to be honest, I didn't care. I thought, you know what? If this is going to lower the inflammation in my body, then I'm going to do whatever it takes. So they both went. Now, it's worth saying here that it's not that I thought that that I had a dairy intolerance all of a sudden or even a gluten intolerance, but here was my thinking. I didn't know what was going on with me, and neither did the doctors. So I just decided to take it from an angle that I was like, you know what? Generally speaking, the human body, when it's not well, it's a way of showing and saying to us that something is out of balance. So I just thought, okay, nobody can give me a diagnosis. I can't diagnose myself because I don't know what the heck is going on with me, and I'm not a doctor. So why don't we just forget the diagnosis and just focus on healing the body in a holistic way and hope to God it works. So getting rid of gluten, getting rid of dairy, that was the start. Next thing I decided was, well, what's the healthiest food on the planet, in my opinion? Fruits and vegetables. So I'm thinking like fruits and vegetables, I just want to eat a ton of them because we all know, doesn't matter what diet you follow, it cannot be argued that they hold the most nutrition in terms of you know, vitamins, minerals, water content, all that good stuff. So I thought, I need to eat a ton of vegetables, except for one tiny detail. I couldn't digest them. I couldn't freaking digest them. So now what? In fact, they made me the sickest I had ever been. Salads, raw fruits and vegetables. Oh my goodness. They just tore me apart. The bloating, the nausea, the diarrhea or constipation. It was a complete nightmare, not only from the symptoms, but because it's been ingrained in me that they're the most healing foods. So if they were hurting me and not helping me, what the heck was I gonna do? But never say die. I started to look into juicing, and now I'm going to explain what I mean when I say juicing. I'm not talking about smoothies because there's a lot of misconceptions around the differences between a smoothie and a juice. And I'm not talking about store-bought juices either, although they probably would have been better than nothing. I'm talking about freshly pressed, extracted juices using a real juicer. So that's when it removes the pulp, the fiber from the fruit or vegetable, and you're just left with juice alone. Now, I know that there's a lot of controversy over juicing because some people say, well, why on earth would you juice? Because, you know, the body needs the fiber. Other people have a huge appreciation and have tons of successful stories with juicing. So, you know, it's definitely, there's two sides of the fence on that one, but I'm going to speak on my own and say that nobody can convince me otherwise that juicing is harmful. Juicing was the answer. Let me tell you, it saved my life. I strongly believe that it was the juicing that not only allowed me to still function, but also healed me. I ended up juicing every day, pretty much all day, as much as I could. I wasn't on any strict schedule, but you know, I would try to get a juice in for morning, lunch, dinner, and even sometimes before bed. Now, I wasn't just juicing, so I should throw that out there before I continue. I didn't just live off of juice. I was still eating food. And I also want to point out that I was not doing a juice fast. I've never done a juice fast in my life. So a lot of people, when they hear about juicing, they think, oh, you have to do a 3-day juice fast or 7-day juice fast. It wasn't that. I was just incorporating daily juice into my life because it removed all that fiber, and that's what I was having a hard time digesting. So when you just drink straight juice, it's going straight into your bloodstream, no digestion required, and it just gave me so much energy. Even despite not feeling well, my energy levels started to rise. And if you've never juiced before, juicing can be compared to drinking a coffee. You know, it's kind of like you just get that surge of energy, but without the crash, and it's good for you. So I figured out a way how to get those fruits and vegetables inside me without causing too much harm as far as symptoms go. Now, as far as what I was eating and what I wasn't eating, I went so intense on this. So I cut out all processed food. And when I say all processed food, I mean all processed food. I wouldn't even have hardly condiments of any kind unless it was just like a little bit of like salt and pepper or maybe a little brown sugar on a sweet potato. I went so hardcore because I was just so determined to only eat natural foods. So nothing processed, no junk food whatsoever. Of course, no fast food, that goes without saying, I think at this point. No candy, nothing. Everything was made with these two hands at home. And the only thing that I was cooking with were whole foods. Now, because at that time I had a very compromised gut, I was not able to tolerate grains or beans or anything. Like, just if someone even said that word, those words around me, I would be bloated and sick instantly, I swear. So those were definitely not on the menu at the time. But what I was able to tolerate were anything kind of in the potato family. Regular potatoes were definitely a go-to for me. I usually just had baked potatoes, or sometimes I would mash them. Sweet potatoes were a #1 go-to for me. I got really creative on different ways to make them, but I just made them as is. I didn't add any butter or anything like that. Again, maybe just a little cinnamon and brown sugar, but sweet potatoes, I ate so many sweet potatoes. Butternut squash was another favorite of mine. All of those foods were really gentle on my stomach. As far as fruit goes, I could not tolerate fruit, but I did end up doing a little bit of research, and I found that if you cook your fruit, that it kind of pre-digests. Well, any cooking of any food kind of pre-digests the food for you compared to when eating it raw. So I took that concept with fruit and I would actually cook my fruit a little bit before eating it, and I was able to better tolerate it that way. I also had a lot of bananas. They were also a food that I could tolerate pretty easily. My food list was very, very small, and I actually kept a journal documenting every time I ate, how I felt afterwards, but I didn't really step outside of what I used to call my safe foods, and I just stuck to those foods as well as juicing. So between those two things, I end up losing an incredible amount of weight. I definitely think that it had to do with a combination of both the fact that I was nauseated and unable to eat a lot of times because I just didn't have an appetite, but that was also coupled with the fact that all of a sudden I radically changed my diet. I went from eating, whatever, whenever, processed foods galore, all this stuff, to all of a sudden eating a very, very clean whole foods diet. Now, this video is starting to get a little long, so I'm going to try to speed up the rest of the story here, but I think I've explained the gist of what I wanted you guys to hear. So the good news is that I did end up healing. Now, it took me a long time. It took me almost 2 years to fully be healed. And I want to point that out just because I know when we're not feeling good, 1 hour of not feeling good is enough to just make you feel crazy. Like, we all want to feel good as quick as possible. So sometimes we can be a little impatient with the process. And I want to point out how long it took, because sometimes healing can be just around the corner and you feel like it's never going to happen. And believe me when I tell you, I felt that numerous times, like terrified for my life, quite literally, and it felt like all my strides, all of my efforts in trying to eat healthy and eat clean, I would just feel better, and then all of a sudden I'd be sick again. And it was just this yo-yo back and forth, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back type of thing that was happening for 2 years off and on. And I remember my own family even being shocked that I was so persistent and consistent, because it appeared at the time like it wasn't really doing anything, but behind the scenes in my body, it was. Little by little, I started to feel better. Some of the symptoms started to drop while others stuck around longer, but slowly but surely I could feel a difference happening. I could feel that, oh, I'm not as sick as I was 2 months ago or 5 months ago, so on and so forth. My energy was going up, the excess weight was coming off. I was really starting to feel better than I ever had, except for that one time when I was eating really high raw, which I will literally never forget that feeling. But at any rate, I started to not just feel better about my symptoms, but my clarity, my energy. It was incredible. After 2 years, I was symptom free. I never believed that that day would come, if I'm being honest with you. I literally thought this is just my new way of life. Literally felt like I was, someone on the outside looking in on my loved ones, my friends, having a good old time, while inside I'm feeling sick. I can't eat what they're eating. I just felt miserable. I felt depressed. I never thought I would get better again, especially when the doctors didn't even know what was going on with me in the first place. I thought I was just destined to be sick. 2 days is a long time to not feel well. 2 years was a very, very long time to not feel well. To this day, I still don't even know what happened to me. I don't know why I woke up sick one morning and stayed that way for 2 years. I have no idea. I will never know. But what I do know is that the power of a whole food plant-based diet, the power of fruits and vegetables and natural foods that we were designed to eat, it healed me. Whatever the heck was going on, it healed me. And even though it wasn't fast, the time is going to pass anyways. Imagine I had not been as consistent, as strict with my diet. Maybe I'd still be sick to this day. So the point is that don't give up if you don't see results immediately. Sometimes it just takes time for us to heal. Like I mentioned before, I have always been passionate about natural health and the healing powers of foods, but after having this personal experience of mine, I cannot be convinced otherwise. I love understanding how food works in our body, and I just think it's such a beautiful, miraculous, hopeful thing to know how healing it can actually be. So fast forward to now, I have this whole channel where I talk about health and weight loss content surrounding a whole food plant-based diet, and this is one of my strongest reasons for doing so. While I do understand everybody wanting their dream body and weight loss always being a hot topic, right? But we also have to remember that eating this way also heals us. It also helps us, and it also prevents us from being sick. I feel like I could literally shout it from the mountaintops that eating a whole food plant-based diet is just the way to go. And that's not to say that it's a cure-all for absolutely any and everything. So I certainly hope that I'm not coming off that way, because that's not what I mean. Especially, you know, something genetically could be wrong with my heart. But what I'm saying is that I feel that it's the safest path of eating if you have something wrong. It's the only diet, to my knowledge, that has been proven to have healing powers. So it's not to say that it's 100% going to cure you, but it is to say that you probably have your best shot at it eating this way. All right, guys, so this video is entirely too long. My apologies, but I hope you enjoyed it either way. So this was my story of how I lost a lot of weight and how I healed my body following a whole foods plant-based diet. Again, if you're new here, then I welcome you to stick around. So just hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my future videos. And for all of you always following me, thank you so much. And I will see all of you in the next one.